This is the Rugged Truth Podcast. I am Dr. Bryan Fergus, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast. I'm coming to you again this week from Bryan's Bible Bunker, my recording studio in Central Illinois. Love it here, having a lot of fun using this studio. My wife Stacy and I decided to move here months and months and months ago. In fact, we also decided that it was time to step out of full-time pastoral ministry. And so we did that in November of 2021. We had made the decision many months earlier. In fact, back in the spring of 2021, we felt God calling us to move and do something else during this season of our lives. So we made that decision, like I said, months earlier, but then the senior pastor we were serving with needed an unexpected sabbatical that lasted many months. And another one of our executive leadership team was suffering with the passing of his wife. And so we just waited and knew that the time would come for us to make that decision. I knew that God was moving me away from the pulpit and the pew and into the classroom full time. In fact, I was recently reading over my journals from 2021 and my journal entries all through the year, actually starting in about April or so. We're just like, clearly, Lord, I know that you're calling us to move on. And it was always our plan to step away at some point and relocate to the Midwest here in Central Illinois to be close to our family. And I know that a lot of the people that I was serving as an executive teaching pastor back in Phoenix, Arizona, thought that our departure was very abrupt. There were reasons for our departure, and I want to talk to you about them today. I want to talk to you about them because they really bring up some deeper issues that I think we all need to pause and consider at different times in our lives. And I want you to understand and hear my heart on this as I talk about my decision to step out of full-time vocational or professional ministry into the classroom as a professor. I want you to know that I'm not disparaging anybody. I'm not putting anybody on blast and condemning and judging. That's not how I do things. I just want to have an honest conversation with you, my friends, about this because many of you have asked, Pastor Bryan, why are you now Professor Bryan? Why did you step out of full-time pastoral ministry? So there are really 4 reasons why I quit being a pastor. That's what I want us to talk about today, those 4 reasons why I quit being a pastor. And what I want to do is go from specific, those issues that deal with me personally, and then out to general, those issues that I think deal with the church at large. And let me see if you can identify with some of these, because I think maybe the things that were moving me to make some life changes might also be moving you to make some life changes. I also want you to know, first of all, I'm not disparaging or blasting anybody. I also want you to know that I love the church. This is not a criticism of the church. I love the church and will continue to serve the church in any way that I can. Stacy and I are plugged into a great fellowship here in Central Illinois that we just absolutely love. So let's get to those reasons. 4 reasons why I quit being a pastor, why I quit being in full-time vocational or professional ministry. And the first reason was this: work-life balance. Have you heard that phrase lately? Work-life balance. It's when we talk about, the quality of our lives and how much time we spend on task and how much time we spend on building relationship. I read something from an author that I really like, Max Lucado. You've probably heard of him. Years ago, Max Lucado wrote that we're designed by God to be human beings, not human doings. You see the distinction that he's making? We're human beings. This is who we are, and we are not what we do. And I got to tell you something. In my life as a pastor, I was a human doing. I had neglected the being part of my side and was focusing on the doing part of my life. And I know I needed to make some changes for the sake of my family, for the sake of my health. I wanted to focus on them and me. I loved the people that I served Jesus with in the church, especially the folks in the pews. I just loved them so much. But I wanted to spend more time with the people that I love the most. Do you see what I mean? I wanted to be able to focus on the relationships with the people that I love the most. And that's my wife, that's my kids, that's my extended family, my folks, my siblings, all of that. There were no family problems that we were struggling with, nothing like that. It was just I was spending most of my time away from the people that I love the most. And I didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I retired from vocational professional ministry. I was at a place where I could do that. I think a lot of things led me to make that value judgment. I had watched friends bury spouses. I had watched friends bury kids without ever getting to really live with those people. And I didn't want to have the later years of my life plagued with that regret. And so I wanted to make that shift. I mean, not whining. I mean, every job I think is stressful. Ministry is particularly stressful, especially over the course of the past several years. You couldn't make a move during the pandemic as a pastor without getting some kind of criticism and beratement, because everybody thinks they know how to be a pastor better than you. Even the person who just stepped into the church for the first time. It's a strange dynamic. But ministry was very stressful. It was having a negative impact on my physical health and my emotional health as well. And so I retired because I could. Work-life balance was the first reason why I quit being a pastor. The second reason was this. There was a clear calling that my work in vocational pastoral ministry was done. A clear calling. God had called me to a specific church to accomplish some specific tasks. And then he told me several years later that my work was done. And I thought, well, wait a second, it's not quite complete. And he revealed to me that it was never going to be completed. And if you're like me, you immediately think, wait a second, I thought you called me to do this, God. Now you're telling me it's not going to get done. Did I mishear you? And then I realized that God does that sometimes. I was thinking, wait, why in the world would God call me to do a work if he knows that work is not going to be accomplished? And then I remembered the prophet Jeremiah. I love the prophet Jeremiah. In fact, he's been a ministry hero of mine. And in Jeremiah chapter 7, God calls Jeremiah to do these incredible tasks, to tell the people of Israel, the leaders of Judah, to do certain things. All right? God calls him to tell these people to do certain things. And then listen to what God says. When you tell them all this, they will not listen to you. When you call to them, they will not answer. Isn't it strange that sometimes God calls us to do a work that he knows will not get accomplished? Why would he do that in Jeremiah's case? Well, he wanted these people to know the truth regardless of how they would respond to it, right? Because God would hold them accountable. And without being snarky about it, he wanted to be able to say, see, I told you. This is what you should do, and you didn't do it, and I told you this is what's going to happen, and sure enough, that's what's going to happen. And in ministry, you do what God calls you to do regardless of the outcome. And if the outcome is that what he has called you to do is not going to be completed, well, that doesn't mean that you've misheard him. That just means that he's doing something different, bringing out different outcomes than you expected, because we're living out of partial information. You deliver the message, and if no one listens, and then you be quiet and you just stay anyway, then you become what we call an accomplice. And that's not me. I am moved to do the right thing. So that's my personal situation. Why did I quit being a pastor? Work-life balance and a clear calling that my work was done. I knew what God was calling me away from. I just didn't know what he was calling me to. But he was calling me to something that I'm better suited to do during this season of my life. And that brings us to the third reason why I quit being a pastor, and that is this: to focus on training the next generation of future pastors and leaders. I've talked about this often in recent episodes of the Rugged Truth podcast, and I've told you in this episode and previous episodes that I'm now a full-time online professor. I teach theology, I teach biblical studies, I teach courses in Christian ministry, spiritual formation, several different topics, and I enjoy it all. And I made the switch from, the pulpit and pew to the lectern in the classroom, so to speak, because I see how important it is to train up the next generation of pastors and leaders. I have this just burning sense of urgency that we need to get the next generation ready, because there's a lot of unhealth in evangelical Christian church leadership right now. Egos are going crazy. In a previous episode of the Rugged Truth podcast, we talked about all of the celebrity pastors who are falling to scandal. Christian sociologists are noticing this. Non-Christian sociologists are noticing the unhealth that is dividing the church right now. And studies that they are conducting are revealing an abundance of leaders with what are called cluster B mental health disorders. Those are disorders like antisocial behavior disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Narcissistic personality disorder. That's look at me, look at me, look at me, and you are something to be used, not valued. What's crazy is that these cluster B mental health disorders are super prevalent among church planters right now. I would point you to a great book by Chuck DeGroat that I might have mentioned before on the Rugged Truth podcast. I use it as a textbook in a couple of courses. It's called When Narcissism Comes to Church, if you want to look at some of those statistics. And realizing that this is the situation that we're in right now, I felt called to teach future generations the right way to do ministry. Now, I know that sounds really arrogant, right? But for me, the right way to do ministry is pretty apparent. It's not use ministry as a platform to serve yourself. It's use ministry as a platform to serve Jesus and his church. And so, speaking of platforms, I thought as I perceived that God was leading me to share this message from a platform that would have a greater influence, because there is such a need among future generations of church leaders. 32 years of ministry, vocational ministry experience as a pastor, 22 years of experience in teaching in the classroom. The Lord said, it's time for you, Bryan, to reach out and make sure that this next generation of leaders is healthy. And I hope this is one where it actually works. Unlike Jeremiah, I hope God isn't saying, hey, you do this, but no one's going to listen to you. I really hope that, I pray that it's making a difference. Future generations of pastors have to answer the question, who are they going to serve? Jesus or themselves? I've been quoting Mark chapter 10 a lot in the Rugged Truth podcast lately, where Jesus says, even the Son of Man came to serve and not to be served, but to give his life as a ransom for many. Our model as Christian ministry leaders is selfless, sacrificial service that benefits the cause of Christ and Christ's people. So that's one of the reasons why I quit being a vocational pastor. I wanted to focus more time on training future pastors and ministry leaders. And it's working. God's giving me ample opportunity to do so. Which brings me to the fourth reason why I quit being a pastor. And not only am I concerned about the future leaders of the church, I'm concerned about the future church. And I want to help figure out how to be the church now. That's the fourth reason why I quit being a pastor. I need to step back and figure out how we can be the church now. Everything has changed in the way the church functions in 21st century America. Everything has changed. Who knew that post-pandemic we would still have mass amounts of people who have chosen not to come back to church? Some are still plugged into the church online. Some have just walked away from church completely. Overall, we've talked about this recently on the Rugged Truth podcast, evangelical church attendance in America is down. And listen, we can go one of two ways at this point. We're at kind of a fork in the road. We can pretend that everything is just the same, and that we're all just experiencing a little slump or something like that. We can put on blinders and we can just go on like usual. That's one path. Bury our head in the sands. Or we can wake up. We can wake up. Some are keeping their heads in the sand. Some pastors and ministry leaders keeping their heads in the sands and refusing to recognize that the way we do church has got to be different now. I keep telling those people, because I know some of them well, I keep telling those people, listen, I wish it was 1995 too. It was easy to do ministry in 1995, but it's not. It's not. And some folks, honestly, between us, some folks need to retire quietly, but I need to start learning how to be the church now. I want to help us figure out how to be the church now. We know that more people are attending church online in this digital on-demand world. And so we've got to figure out, how do we fulfill the Great Commission to go into all the world and make disciples? I'm serious. I'm very serious, very focused, doing tons of research on figuring out new ways to be the church and do ministry in this new global setting. I know that online content, online courses are part of that, but I'm still working on ways to build online community, real online community. Thinking about even maybe launching a Facebook page for you Rugged Truth listeners where we can just interact with one another. That might be part of it, but that's not all of it. That just still seems pretty anemic to me. I stepped out of traditional Christian ministry because I think the traditional way of doing church is losing its effectiveness in 21st century America. So that's why I quit being a pastor. Nothing crazy. Work-life balance, a clear calling that my work in pastoral ministry was done, a focus on training future leaders, and a burning desire to help the church figure out how to be the church in the 21st century. That's pretty much it. I don't know if you were looking for scandals or anything like that, but they're not there. And I hope what I have said has given you something to think about. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for this day and for giving us an opportunity to really think about why we do what we do. You've been so gracious to guide me in these past many months, year. It's been more than a year now. You've guided me through this process. Thank you for being gentle and clear. Lord, I pray that as my friends think about what they're going to do with their lives in the future, maybe it's a work-life balance issue or a vocational choice, would you give them wisdom and clear direction? I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Rugged Truth Podcast. As always, I'm going to ask you to do me a few favors. Please like these videos and podcasts. Subscribe to our channels, our YouTube channel, our podcast channels. Share these videos and podcasts with the people that you love. They need to hear this stuff too. Audio listeners, stick around. There's a little bit of bonus content for you as we drill just a little bit deeper on one of the reasons why I quit being a pastor. We'll have a really short break and then we'll get into that. But for the rest of you who are viewing, God bless you. We'll see you really soon.